American trade policies. I think it's one of the reasons that wages have gone down and jobs have gone abroad. Be that as it may, the last study that I saw, may have changed, has anybody said that on the major networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, there has not been one word of discussion about the largest trade agreement in the history of America? Do you think that makes sense? How does that happen? So what I'm saying is that when we talk about a political revolution in America, which is what I believe we need, it needs to raise public consciousness, to have elections not in which 36% of the people vote, but where 80 or 90% of the people vote. A poll done last year, they asked the American people, can you tell me which political party controls the U.S. Senate and U.S. House? 63% of the American people couldn't answer that
nobody
question.
knows anything on that stuff, right?
All right.
Yeah.
But how do we have a vibrant democracy where government works for the people if people don't even know which party controls the House or the Senate?
But we can agree that that's the problem. We might not agree on what the solution to the problem is.
Well, one of the solutions is that we have a media which focuses on the real issues facing the American people, holds political parties and candidates accountable, rather than does political gossip. That's one thing that we can do.
I don't think that's unreasonable. But I would also say, Senator, that Republicans have figured out how to go around the filter and go directly to voters, and maybe Democrats need to do a better job of doing the same thing.
I think you're absolutely right about that. Right, yeah. And I'll tell you where I see really a lot of optimism. And this is an advertisement. Sanders.senate.gov. Got it? We have a very active website. We will have soon about 1 million people who are part of our Facebook effort. We have more people on Facebook than any other member of the Senate, precisely for those reasons.
Yep.
That I think we have got to figure out mechanisms to get directly to people.
It's direct democracy.
Exactly.
All right. Sir, ma'am, thank you.
Hi. Thank you. I also have a climate question. We obviously live in a capitalistic society that depends on growth and expansion, and you and others have observed that we're at a point where we cannot continue to just expand and use resources. Yes. How do we reconcile? We can't just shut down our economic system. What do we do moving forward?
We hear a lot about that here in Texas, which produces so much crude oil, but are we becoming victims of our own success? That's usually how it's couched.
And that's a great question. And this is what I think. I think we have to take a hard look at what I would call consumerism in America, which says that the goal of life is just buying and buying and buying. I think what we need is a good friend of mine, Bill McKibben. Bill is very active at 350.org and one of the leaders in the climate change movement. He wrote a book called Deep Economy. And what his suggestion was that instead of having a society just on buying, 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 and producing, 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 you have a society which is based on community, where people's satisfaction and joy in life is being with other people, rather than the need to purchase more and more stuff that in many cases we don't need. So I think, to answer your very, very good question, the way to go is if we provide health care to all people, which is what every other major country on earth has done. If we say that educational opportunity is available to all people, regardless of your income. If we can deal with the basic economic needs of people, we don't have to have an economy just based on growth, especially when almost all of the income associated with the growth goes to the top 1%. But, you know, it's a fairly radical idea that you're proposing. But I think that's what we've got to be thinking about. You know, just in California, you know, they have now cut water consumption by 25%.
In fact, the mandatory restrictions in California, first ever there, are in response to terrible drought conditions, but also some of the. But what you're talking about, Senator, is changing the culture of this country.
Yes, that's right. And it's
harder even than winning the presidency as an independent.
Well, that's on day 2. After we win.
So, pace yourself, right?
After we win and take on the billionaire class.
Great.
Then we deal with it. But it is, you know, it is a very important. I mean, let me throw out the simplest of questions, which what you're really asking. What makes human people happy? What makes us as human beings happy and content? What is a satisfied life? Now, that's a question we should be asking ourselves.
Right.
Ultimately, you know, it's an interesting, in a country like Denmark, where they provide health care to all of their people, where they provide educational opportunity for free, strong child care, much more economic security in their public policy than we have. To the degree that you can measure it, they are a happier society than we are.
Right.
Because we have so much anxiety. We got to keep striving and striving and striving, and we don't. There's not that safety net that we need. So you've raised a very fundamental issue, and that will be day 2 of the Sanders.
But of course, Denmark, thank you very much for your question. Come on forward. But of course, Denmark is not an economic power. Denmark is not a military power. Denmark is not the leader of the free world, as America has been. That's our brand. We've embraced it. Would you be willing to trade that status to have a country that was a little bit more chill?
Well, I mean, you raised that question a little while ago when you said, you asked me, how do we fund, which is expensive, free tuition in public colleges and universities? It is expensive, yes. But then we have to take a hard look at other issues like military spending.
The balance might have to shift.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sir.
I had a question in regards to Obama's new proposed authorization for use of military force, and in regards to the war on terror in general. Do our drone strikes in other countries cause more problems than they solve?
Well, I'm against, let me answer the first part of your question, against, if the president's proposal came to the floor of the Senate, I would vote against it.
You think it would pass? Your no vote notwithstanding, would it pass?
I don't know. I don't know. It would be probably a close vote. And it's, the problem is the language is too open-ended, and it allows for us to be there for much too long. And the second part of your question was?
Do our drone strikes cause more problems than they solve?
Sometimes they do.
Isn't our war on terror essentially fueling itself?
That has been the case in some instances. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. This ISIS and these other terrorist groups mean us harm, and we've got to figure out a way to defeat them. But if a drone attack on an innocent village kills a dozen men and women, does that help us bring those people into association with us? It does not.
Substantively, isn't the policy of ISIS and positions similar to that of our ally Saudi Arabia?
No. No. I mean, I'm not, as I just mentioned, Saudi Arabia is a country which is authoritarian, which is oligarchic.
But you're not equating the two.
Well, I think he may have.
But you're not
no,
equating
I
the
would
two.
not.
So Bernie Sanders is president, whatever party you get elected under. And ISIS puts out a video in which Jim Foley or some other journalist, or some non-journalist for that matter, has been beheaded. Is the response of our country to the beheading of one of our citizens to do nothing?
No. No, and I don't think the president is doing that.
But would you do nothing?
No, of course not. And it's not a question of the beheading of one person. What ISIS is doing wherever they have conquered it's unspeakable. I mean, literally is unspeakable. It's barbaric. They have got to be defeated. But if the question of American foreign policy is that our ground troops in combat now leading the fight, or is it the Muslim countries? You got billionaire countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, you have the UAE, you have Jordan there. They have got to lead the effort with our support. But ISIS remains a very serious problem, and I want to see them defeated.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Sir.
Thank you. American politics has kind of become like a big football game.
Yes.
Where both sides are saying anything that comes from the other side is wrong, and they don't want to even listen to it. You've mentioned that going out in rural America and talking to them about economic issues. I would say that there are so many social issues and so much prejudice against anything that happens to come from the liberal side would not even be listened to. And how do you, and I think a lot of this may be due to the right-wing media and the radio programs, like they're giving free press to all these ideas. How do you combat and how do you solve this problem of just prejudice against anything liberal or progressive?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I think overcoming that would be difficult. But this is what I think you say. I think you say to somebody, for example, who's opposed to gay marriage. We use that as an example. You say, okay, look, you're making $22,000 a year. You can't afford to send your kid to college. You can't afford childcare for your young kid. You may or may not have health insurance, and if you do have health insurance, you're paying too much for that health insurance. Your friend's job just went to China, and your dad lost his job at the age of 50 because he was replaced by somebody who was 22 years of age and much lower wages. So you disagree with me on gay marriage and you disagree with me on abortion. I respect that. But can't we come together to fight for an economy so that your kids have a fair shot at doing well in society? That's the message that you make. Now, the guy may say, well, I can't because I am so anti-gay that while you're right on health care and you may be right on the economy, and that will happen. But I think what I have seen in the state of Vermont, my own state where I know best, is that people will disagree with me on the abortion issue, will disagree with me on gay marriage, and say, look, Bernie, I disagree with you on that.
Yep.
But I know you're standing up and you're fighting for me and my kids on these basic economic
So you think Democrats need to go to places where they've not found